Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Bet Torah for the second night of our Symposium of Jewish Responsibility around the world. This evening, we will be hosting two special guests, Eli Beer from Israel and Rabbi Naftali Besser from around the corner, one of the major influencers in Yeshiva Flatbush. Both of these gentlemen work tirelessly for the improvement of the greater Jewish community, which translates into the greater world. Mr. Eli Beer is the founder of United Hatzalah. United Hatzalah is an organization that he founded as a young man, just at 15 years old. Eli had witnessed a tragedy and said he needs to do something to improve the way people are treated medically. He first started with an ambulance, and when he could not get the legislation to approve the method of ambulances that he wanted, he didn't just fight it in City Hall. He just kept doing what he did was saving people. Forget the legislature, the rules, the courts. He wasn't allowed, but he went and he saved the people anyway. Who's going to stop someone from saving people? And that grew and grew. And today, he has 2,000 medics. It's 2017. In just a decade or so, he's got over 2,000 medics with hundreds of ambucycles, with the GPS that can find an invalid or a person that's not well within seconds, and they're attending to the patient within seconds. As you saw in the video, it took about 10 seconds to 15 seconds before someone was able to help revive a cardiac arrest. Eli has received awards from kings and queens around the world, and is very much sought after in many countries to introduce his concepts and his ambucycle to their countries. He's not a stranger in Bet Torah or to our community, and he's previously visited Bet Torah for fundraising and awareness, but today he's here to talk about his responsibility and our responsibility to the whole world at large. Eli is a doer, and he makes a huge impact on people's lives throughout the whole world. And without further ado, well, you know, right before I ask Eli to come up, I'm going to invite my cousin David Hanono from Panama, South America, Central America, to say a couple of words, and I'll let David invite Eli.
Good evening, everybody. Excuse my English if it's not 100% Brooklyn. With the permission of the rabbis, Mr. President Jules Catan, our guest of honor tonight, Eli Beer, and Rabbi Bressler. Is he here?
Not yet.
Okay, with Rabbi Bressler. Like Judah said a few minutes ago, he asked me to introduce my really good friend, Eli Beer. Eli Beer, as you all know, he started at Salah, or he started the movement of the fast responding in Israel when he was only a kid, a teenager, 15, 16 years old. And today, at 44, he has become the ambassador of Hesed. Why I use the word ambassador? Because at Salah, in the last decade or whatever, changed and became united at Salah. Why I say this? Because today, in countries like Mexico, Panama, Argentina, Brazil, I'm talking about this side of the world, we are all united with Eli Beer's United at Salah program and all his team. Things don't happen because they happen. Things happen because Hashem makes it happen. If we analyze his name, Eli, and we break it down, El is Hashem. And Eli is elevate Hashem. Eli, to elevate Hashem. So really, I'm so proud to be your friend, Eli. We in Panama we have United Hatzalah for the last 6 years or so. And in the community, which as you all know, the Panamanian community is very united, very Sephardic. We have saved lives. We go every day, approximately two cases or 1.5 cases per day, and sometimes Friday we had 4. And the community says, what happened before Hatzalah? The only thing we don't get is calls that we don't have an Hoseret in the house, that we need this help, but eventually we get that also, we'll resolve. And Eli Beer, as I'm going to introduce, reflects Kiddush Hashem. He reflects Hesed, to do goodness to people, no matter where you are, even Lo Shelanu, if we have to go, we go. In his team of responders who received the calls in Israel, I've been present in his installations. There's Yehudim and there's Arabim. Am I true, Eli? Is it true? And they all work in brotherly way to help and save people. With this, I want to take the opportunity to ask Eli to take the podium and spread the good word. Hazako Baruch, Eli.
So first of all, good evening to all of you. Thank you for showing up tonight. This was an unexpected trip to America for me, and ended up a very long trip. So thank you for inviting me, and I'm privileged to be here tonight because this synagogue, this shul, is not only a place of Torah, it's in davening, it's actually a place of chesed. So it's an honor to speak here. But before I continue and thank everyone and give you my personal story, we have a very, very important person from the community, Alan, who's a member of Hatzalah here in Brooklyn. And it's actually an honor to have Alan, who everyone knows, who probably saw every home in this area, God forbid, that needs anything from a little cut to anything big. So thank you for you and for all your friends in Hatzalah here in Flatbush. So I want to actually share with you a little insights of why I actually decided to change a lot of what we used to do in Hatzalah in Israel and change it around to a international organization and a more spread out organization. So we started off as a regular small organization with 15 volunteers. We saw the need. We had a child 7 years old who was choking from a hot dog. I was a volunteer at the age of 15 in an ambulance in Israel, and being in the back of an ambulance and seeing the rush where the ambulance driver is trying to beat the traffic and going through anywhere he could get in to just save a person, I volunteered for 1.5 years till this incident where a 7-year-old boy choked from a hot dog. I was 16.5 years old when I saw this boy on the floor, and when we rushed into the house, the parents were devastated, and the mother was yelling at us for coming so late. And she blamed us for the fact that her son is blue and not breathing. And we started doing CPR, trying to save this boy. And after a few minutes, a doctor who passed by saw the ambulance parked downstairs. He ran upstairs to try helping us. And he said there was nothing to do, just bring a sheet to cover this boy. That moment, when I saw that 7-year-old boy, I was 16.5 years old. I didn't have anything else in my head besides a desire to save someone. I didn't have any sports. I didn't have any other hobbies. This was my main thing in life. And I saw a 7-year-old boy die while a doctor lived 2 blocks away and no one thought of calling him. And the ambulance was the one in charge of saving his life, but we knew being inside an ambulance for 1.5 years, we never ever saved anyone. We helped many people, but we never actually saved someone who needed help. And I realized that the only way to save people is if we have doctors like that doctor and other people who are EMTs or paramedics to run to emergencies before it happens, before the actual death happens. So we started a group of 15 volunteers. Like Judah, you said, I had the chutzpah of doing this, even so we weren't actually assigned to do this. We decided to do this on our own. And we said it can't be that people die waiting for an ambulance. And more people die waiting for an ambulance than any disease you could imagine. And we got together and we wanted to get the emergency calls, but the ambulances did not want to share the calls with us, so we decided to use the chutzpah. And we bought scanners and we tapped into their calls. We had like these police scanners and we tapped into their calls, and that's how we started Hatzalah in Israel. And we were 15 volunteers and we started growing to more and more volunteers. Slowly we got to 30 and 40 and 50, and it started going from one community to another community. But the most amazing thing I realized after a few years of volunteering, that everyone that was in the volunteer corps of Hatzalah in Israel were all frum. Like we call frum, which are volunteers with a yarmulke and the payas and the beard, or some without the payas, some with a smaller yarmulke, some with a bigger yarmulke. But everyone was male, everyone was religious, everyone was married, more or less. They had a few single people like me. But this was like a thing, like you had to be frum to be a volunteer in Israel. And I realized after a few years that was saving many, many people. The first person I actually saved, I personally saved, the week we started listening to scanners, I was 16 and a half, a person who was hit by a car. He was 70 years old. He was bleeding terribly from his neck, and I stopped his bleeding with my yarmulke. I had no medical equipment on me. And I just pushed in my yarmulke into his neck, and I was able to stop his bleeding, and he was on Coumadin, which was a death sentence if his blood wasn't stopped. And I realized after a couple of years of volunteering that everyone surrounding me had a yarmulke on. And that's something that bothered me a lot, because we weren't able to save people outside of our communities. Let's say someone in Tel Aviv, in Herzliya, in Ra'anana, and other places were not having the services we had in Jerusalem or in Tzfat or in Bnei Brak. And then I decided, after a few years of volunteering, I decided something has to be changed. And I went ahead to a guy called Niv Granot. He lived in Herzliya, and we had a meeting, and he said, you know what, I see your guys saving lives in Bnei Brak, but in Herzliya, people wait 20 minutes for an ambulance. Why don't we start it here? And I said, you know what, it sounds great, let's start it here. And actually, he started getting volunteers to recruit volunteers. They said, it's fascinating, it's a great idea, let's do it in our communities in Herzliya. And then men and women started joining Hatzalah in Herzliya, and it became a change. The biggest change Hatzalah ever went through was getting secular volunteers, people who are not Shomer Shabbat, who had no yarmulke, to volunteer together with Hasidic volunteers, people who are from very ultra-Orthodox communities. And actually that changed Hatzalah. Rabbi Besser, shalom. Big honor. Big honor.
I just drove your motorcycle away.
Take it for a ride. So we have the honor every time the Chesed mission comes to Israel. Terrific. It's a big honor. So we decided to join these volunteers, and actually made the biggest difference for Hatzalah, because we were saving lives every single day, but all of a sudden we have people who don't look like us volunteer with us together, and it changed our life, literally. And I remember Niv Granot, when he joined, he grew up in a kibbutz north of Tel Aviv, little kibbutz. And he grew up that way, and then he went to Herzliya. The guy never knew anything about Yiddishkeit, like we say, nothing about Judaism, like in the essence of the religion. He knew he's Israeli and Jewish, that's it. And then he joined Hatzalah, and all of a sudden and by the way, if you realize in Israel they have big hatred between religious people and secular people. Haredi and secular hate each other tremendously, especially now these days you see on the news. And all of a sudden Niv Granot comes to see volunteers who are dressed with a beard and the payas and the yarmulke and everything, and he's sitting together with them in a classroom and learning. And all of a sudden he started talking to each other and relating to each other. And one day I see these volunteers sitting with each other and talking, and I said, wow, we created not only an amazing life-saving organization, but we created a value that everyone agrees on, something that we all agree on. It doesn't matter if you eat pork on Yom Kippur, or you eat gefilte fish every Friday night, or eat kibbeh. every Friday night. We actually have something that can connect. People all agree that our children, God forbid if they need help, someone should come immediately, a 90-second response time. We all agree in that. And then one day I get a call from, this turned Hatzalah to a really nice thing in Israel. And one day I get a call from a guy called Muhammad Asli and his friend Murad Aliyan, two Arabs, living in East Jerusalem. And they want to meet with me. So I said, okay, they want to meet. Maybe they want some business or whatever. They meet with me and they said, listen, we've seen Hatzalah all over the city, and we want to have Hatzalah in East Jerusalem. So I had to swallow my and I'm like saying, wait, you Arabs, what do you want in Hatzalah? I said, you know, what's gonna, you know? He says, listen, Muhammad says, my father collapsed at home. He was 55 years old. He collapsed at home. We waited for almost an hour for an ambulance to come help him. The only one who came to help my father was a Jewish family, the only Jewish family in the whole area. The wife is a nurse in the hospital, and she came to help, but she couldn't do anything. She didn't have a defibrillator, she didn't have the right tools, and she was trying to save my father, and she couldn't save him, and he died in front of my eyes. He says, train me to be a volunteer of Hatzalah. I promise you, I will save Jews and Arabs equally. I said, you know what, it makes sense. When we started Hatzalah in Israel, we never had, in our bylaws, we're saving Jewish people. We said we're saving anyone that needs help. And if they want to come help us save lives, why not? Ahlan wa sahlan. We're Jewish, we're proud to be Jewish, but if they want to help us save lives, I wish all the Arabs would come over and say, we want to save lives with you. That would be the greatest thing. But we have to start from somewhere. And they actually joined 15 volunteers, or 20 volunteers, the first Arab volunteers who joined Hatzalah. It was a very weird thing for us. I'll tell you, a lot of people were telling me personally, how could you do this? I said, listen, the only thing we're doing is teaching them how to save people. We're actually teaching these people, if someone is in trouble, go help them. It's not a danger like you're teaching them karate or anything. You're teaching them how to save someone. If someone's not feeling well, how to help him. And if someone's having a cardiac arrest, how to save him. 2 years later, after these volunteers joined, my father on a Shabbat afternoon had a cardiac arrest. And in front of my eyes, my father collapsed. In front of my eyes. And I saw my father fall on the floor, no pulse. And my father was laying there. He was a healthy man, and he was my boss. Actually, my father created in Israel one of the big cemeteries in Israel, Eretz HaChaim. He was one of the founders of Eretz HaChaim. It was a cemetery in Israel. So his business was real estate and mostly the cemetery business. And when I started Hatzalah in Israel many years ago, my father called me over. He says, Eli, you're going to kill my business. So my father was always joking around, saying, you're killing my business. For years, he was joking. And he always got upset at me that I never came to work. I was supposed to come to work, and I had a board meeting in Hatzalah, and I had this in Hatzalah. Every time Hatzalah, he got very upset after a while. How could he, he's my boss. My father had a cardiac arrest in front of my eyes. I started crying, and I forgot everything I knew about saving lives. And my father's on the floor, and I'm crying, and my wife runs in with the medical equipment. She didn't know how to save anyone. But she came with equipment, but I had nothing to do with it because I forgot what I have to do. And I treated thousands of people I treated. But then a rabbi who lives across the street from my father was eating with his family a Shabbat lunch. And he runs in and he says, Eli, let me take over. And he started working with my father. Maybe a minute later, Muhammad Asli, who was driving through the neighborhood, came with a defibrillator, runs upstairs. He didn't know it was my father first. He runs in, he sees me there. He says, move aside. Connected a defibrillator to my father. Gave him 3 shocks with a defibrillator. 9 minutes after they started CPR on my father got his pulse back. 2 or 3 minutes later, he started breathing on his own. And we actually got my father back to life. Well, later on, my father woke up in the hospital. He was back to normal, 100%. No brain damage, everything was fine with him. The doctor tells my father, Dr. Rifkin says to my father, Eli saved your life. It wasn't really that I saved his life, but the volunteer saved my father's life. And my father looked at me and he says, all these years I was kvetching. Kvetching is in Yiddish. I was complaining that you don't show up to work and you don't do this and you don't do that. He says, from now on, I'm never going to complain. You don't have to show up at work. You'll get a paycheck no matter what. And the gift I really got is getting my father back. But the gift I realized that if we want to get to a 90-second response time, and our goal is to reach every emergency within 90 seconds, we have to use all the resources available for us. And since Israel is so diverse, we have religious people, we have secular people, we have Haredi people, Ashkenaz, we have Sepharad, we have every type of Jew there, literally Ethiopians, Russians, and we also have non-Jews. So I said, if I want to get to a 90-second response time, like my father got a 90-second response time, that's why my father was alive, and that's why my father didn't have brain damage. I have to get to everywhere and put volunteers everywhere. And that's when I decided to change the name from Hatzalah in Israel to United Hatzalah, which is Ichud Hatzalah. And then this thing started developing tremendously, so I have to update you. We're almost 4,000 volunteers today. Since we started, we treated over 2.5 million people. Average response time in Israel is under 3 minutes all over the country. Average response time. Some places were a lot higher, but most of the places, the cities like Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Bnei Brak, I always joke around Bnei Brak, we have so many volunteers. We have almost 200 volunteers for a small city like Bnei Brak. There, before the emergency happens, the volunteers are at home already. They're treating the person. Like they knock on the door, they say within 30 seconds you have an emergency. That's why we're here already. Literally, that's how fast they are. So we have a really great spread out. And in Yerushalayim, which is the largest city in Israel, we get there so quick thanks to our motorcycles. And I don't know if you ever realize these motorcycles that you see all around, and I parked one outside, made a big revolution in Israel. We were the first ones actually in the world to use motorcycles as ambulances. And it made sense, because if you think about Israel, they have such narrow roads. Alan, when you go to emergencies here in Brooklyn, you have big roads, you can go through, you have so many ways to go through, but in Israel, if they have an emergency in Machne Yehuda, forget about it. The guy is going to die 4 times till an ambulance arrives there, or till a car arrives there. So we had volunteers respond to cars, but then we realized we cannot get there fast enough. And we decided to buy these motorcycles and turn them into ambulances, and we call them ambucycles. The nice part about this, that we also did this in chutzpah, because the government actually never authorized us then to do this. We had to do it on our own, because if we would have asked the government for permission, I would have been 95 till we get the permission. So we decided to do this most official looking, that no one will ask questions. You put on a siren, lights and sirens and everything, and we just started responding to calls. And today we have 650 of these motorcycles. But I'll end with this. I'll just say, this did not finish only in Israel. Because the word of Kiddush Hashem, Kiddush Hashem is really the essence of Judaism. We have a responsibility as Jews to share all the good things we do in Judaism. Some people call it Tikkun Olam. Like you said yesterday, I heard. It's Tikkun Olam b'malchut Shaddai. Every day, we say this all the time. We're Jews. We have to fix the world to make the world a better place. And Jews are always the first to do these things. All the great innovations of Chesed came from the Jewish people. And all over the history. And I said Hatzalah is one of the greatest innovations in the world. Literally. Hatzalah in Brooklyn here, you see it all the time, the Chesed they do here. But in Israel, to see Jews and Arabs, and Haredi and secular, saving lives, fighting with each other, fighting together to save other people's lives that they don't even know. Every single day, we're treating 1,000 people. It started spreading around the world, and people started asking questions. In India, I met a guy who has the 2nd largest ambulance company in the world. This guy, Shafi Meyer, he started the 2nd largest ambulance company in India. A few thousand ambulances, a few thousand of them. He told me, I never save lives with my ambulances. I transfer people who are alive, but if someone has a cardiac arrest, forget about it, he's dead. There was no chance of us saving him. He says, I'm jealous. I have, millions of people get treated and helped every year by my organization, but I never been able to save anyone. So I said to him, so start Hatzalah. I said, just change the name, because I'm afraid in India they're going to call it Hezbollah instead of Hatzalah. So I said, call it something else. And he called it Emergency. And he has thousands of volunteers today who respond to emergencies before the ambulances in India. it started going around the world, and now we have it in Jersey City, like you saw in the video here. This mayor of Jersey City, Mayor Philip, contacted us through my chairman, and he says, we want to start Hatzalah concept like you have in Israel, in Jersey City, for the whole city. And we said, why not? Let's do it. If we could help them start this concept of Hatzalah, like you have in Brooklyn, thank God, within 2 minutes, someone could come and help someone. Why not have it in Jersey City? And I interviewed, the first guy that I interviewed in Jersey City was a former cop, an Irish guy. Him and his wife are both cops, former cops. They're now retired. And he says to me a very interesting thing. He said, right across the street from my house, they had a snowstorm, a blizzard. And right across the street from my house, a person had a cardiac arrest, and he was my best friend. But I wasn't able to help him because I didn't even know he had a cardiac arrest. This happened in the middle of the night. Over an hour it took for an ambulance to arrive during a blizzard. He said, if I would have known that he's in the trouble, I would have ran over and started CPR. I would have helped him. I would have maybe saved his life. He was a young man. So he was the first volunteer to actually join Hatzalah. And today, every single day, he helps people in Jersey City. He's retired. He has the time. And he goes around. Him and his wife became volunteers. And it's beautiful to see the amount of people who want to do good in this world. And when I went there, I was talking in front of the whole community there that came, the mayor and everyone. They said, this idea of responsibility between people, technology, that we know how to locate the closest people within 3 seconds. We have the best technology in the world, that we know how to locate the closest 5 people to every emergency, came from Israel. We were the first ones in the world to actually do this. The motorcycle and other ideas. So this thing is going worldwide, and Baruch Hashem, we treated millions of people in Israel and millions of people around the world, including in Panama and other places. So just share the word, and I hope, Bezrat Hashem, this is going to bring Mashiach, because this is real chesed. Any questions?
Many questions. If anybody has any questions, please, Ellie's a good.
Yeah.
Anybody?
I'm sure it's more than the ambi-cycles, but how's your technology to get these first responders there so quickly?
The technology that we created is called the Moskowitz Life Compass. It's a funny story how I got this done. This is 12 years ago. Dovi Mezel, if some of you know, the Chesed Mission people that come with Rabbi Besser every year, they meet Dovi, he's one of my main guys. He came to me 12 years ago and he says, listen, Ellie, they have a GPS now on phones. I said, what? He said, a GPS on the phone. I said, you're talking about a phone, a GPS? You talk about 12 years ago, it's like 120 years in technology things. So I said to him, you remember Dovi, he gave, so I said to him, Dovi, you're talking shtiyot, get out of here. He says, no. We could locate the closest volunteers to every emergency by their GPS on their phone. This is before Uber and before Get and all these other technologies. And I said, okay, you know what, let's learn a little bit more. We started researching and we found that this could be happening. This could happen. And we went to a company in Herzliya, Matrix. They said, yeah, we could do it for you. It'll take two years to develop this idea. They went crazy. We had to make them sign NDAs and everything. And it's going to cost $1 million to develop. And we didn't have $1 million. Where were we going to get $1 million? I wrote a letter to a woman in Florida. Her name was Cherna Moskowitz. And I said to her, I never spoke to her before, never met her. And I said to her, we have this idea that instead of using walkie-talkies, like every EMS organization in the world uses, we want to come and find the closest volunteers based on their location. That way we'll for sure find the right people. Instead of finding someone very far away, or someone, let's say if I'm in an area like in Hadera, they say a call, Rehov Bat Yam in Hadera. I don't know what that is, Rehov Herzl, I don't know where that place is, but I could save someone if I know I'm nearby. And I wrote her a short, one-page letter, and we need $1 million. The end was, we need $1 million to do this. And she wrote a few weeks later a letter back saying, enclosed, please find $1 million to develop this idea. We were excited very, very much. This was the biggest day for Hatzalah in Israel. And it was Siyata Dishmaya. The whole organization is Siyata Dishmaya. Everything we do. And we developed this technology that now is Nowforce. A company called Nowforce took it worldwide. And the Olympics use them now in Brazil and other things, so whatever. We own 15% of that company. Yes.
What countries have you been helping develop United Hatzalah?
So many countries we helped develop it. We came with the idea and they continued by their own. Some we actually helped, we walked them through it, like in Panama by David and his members there. We want to really get ourselves focused in Israel and not to lose focus from Israel. So what we did is we did a franchise model, and people could turn to us, and people did turn to us from everywhere around the world. After my TED Talk, I got calls or emails from Iran even. And I said to them, you don't need us, you have the Hezbollah. We're Hatzalah. But he was like a doctor from Iran wrote us, he wrote us that he wanted to actually do this in Iran. I said, this could be working anywhere, but you have to know that you have to be proud of the fact that it's coming from Israel. So some places have no problem. I was invited by the ruler of Dubai, to present this in Dubai, and I came and I gave him the whole presentation, and he was there, and all the members, was a government summit, and they paid for my trip there and everything. I told them that this came from Israel, this whole idea and the technology and everything. They loved it. It was a big Kiddush Hashem to do this there. And we get, once a week, we get email or inquiries about taking this idea. Manchester is now on their way. Not the Jewish community, which they have already, Hatzalah, but the non-Jewish community also want to do it. I feel bad for Rabbi Besser. Rabbi Besser, you have the best questions. I need a question from you.
I want to ride on a motorcycle.
I actually have 2 helmets. I'll give you the bigger one.
What does that mean?
You have a big head.
How much does one of them cost?
Each one of them fully loaded costs $36,000.
36,000?
Yeah, fully loaded. Yeah.
As opposed to an ambulance?
An ambulance could cost $150,000, or in Brooklyn it's more, but we in Israel. But this is not a fundraiser, but people ask. It's cool. Oh, we also have, by the way, Rabbi Besser with the community came to Israel. We had a good friend, Steve Esses.
Claire, where are you?
Oh, where are you, Claire? How are you? So we had he was a close friend of mine, and he donated Ambicycle in Israel, and unfortunately got very sick and passed away, very close to his family. And we decided, the community, the Chesed program, dedicated a bike, an e-bike, we call it. It's an electric bike. We give it to volunteers. It's fascinating to see it. We have a guy, he's a Ger Chassid, Ger Chassidim, a very long payas. He rides his bicycle in Tel Aviv. What a Kiddush Hashem. On Shabbat, on Yom Kippur, he's driving his bicycle to save people's lives. And this is one of the bikes that we have is in memory of Stephen. Yes?
I've heard you speak before, and the organization is obviously great. Are you being reached across the community? Are you going to other schools? I've heard you here, and I love it. But my question is, are you going to Shai Tzion, another synagogue or other synagogue where you can more reach the community as a whole?
Yes, look, I would love to speak everywhere. So every Shabbat I speak in another community, not always in Brooklyn. I spoke from Morocco to Gibraltar to Japan. I spoke in many places around the world. I love the Syrian community. This is the best most charitable communities in the world. Literally, you should be proud of yourselves. Really, the Sephardic community, and especially the SYs, are the most charitable, and there is a lot to learn from this community. Really, not only chesed, charity, everything, and respect to your parents, and so many other things that I learned being here over the years. So I would love to be invited in more shuls. Sha'arei Tzion, I didn't speak for a few years, but I'd love to come back. But this is my favorite shul, by the way.
Because of me.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and